Hello, internet. Hello, people who like Lorcana and people who like Sapphire Steel. I've always had that opinion of I've always been the big Sapphire Steel fan. It's like the color combo that I sort of really fell in love with the game with. And there feels like there's so much to play in it. There's the Kiwi bird, there's the ramp version. There was loads of different builds of it. And in set 9, I've kind of finally found a build that I think really brings together what the best it can do in this set. And of course, there are different attempts at it. I still have a Kiwi Birds list that I work on in set 9, like sort of a bit more privately, that I do. I haven't made public yet. There is, of course, the Scar builds that we've been seeing going around. But this is like no brand new idea. This has been, people have been getting top 4s, people have been getting nice finishes with this attempt at sort of Sapphire Steel in the set. And I really liked it. To be honest with you, I think it's the most optimal. Now, having played pretty much all the builds that you can do in Sapphire Steel, maybe there are some more unique ones I haven't seen. But after doing Kiwi Birds, after doing Scar builds, after doing Jasmine ally builds, this has felt probably the most well put together and well-rounded attempt at the list in this set. And I think, to be honest with you, it does have quite a lot of capability in a competitive environment. I could see myself maybe even wanting to bring this to an event at some point in my life. I can see it doing quite well at an event. DLC event, maybe at 12 rounds. I found it has a few issues with it, but I think, if you're looking at a CCQ, store champs, winner case, 5k, all those things, I think it has a lot of capability there. I think you'd be very bold to bring it to a DLC, but honestly, I wouldn't judge you. I still think it's very good. There is a lot of matchups so I feel quite favored and quite happy going into. And yeah, I can sort of run you through it. It's a set 9 BTH, which is Beyond the Horizon, which ended up only landing on 2 Beyond the Horizons. I think you have a real good choice there between if you want to play with Doc or you want to play with Beyond the Horizon. Personally, I just prefer the base. You're going to draw 2 cards and you're going to pay 2 ink to do that. Then Beyond the Horizon, which is quite situational. You might need to ramp to your Vincenzo Santorini, I can never pronounce it right, or a Hades, or maybe have the bodies on board so you can sing Beyond the Horizon, whereas Doc is there's no situation where you can't just play it and just draw 2 cards. So I much prefer that, and a 1/3 body. It's just another annoying body for them to remove. But all together, I've played this on, of course, the sim we don't talk about. I saw some people online call it Voldemort. That sim I played up to rank 9. I played this locally, and it has some very interesting results, from getting 2-0s to being 0-2'd, making a couple changes to the list, and at least bringing them to 1-2s at the worst. So altogether, I think the list is pretty good. And compared to the Scar build, or we can knock out the Kiwi Bird field first. Of course, that is a more aggressive curve-based deck where you just want to play 1, 2, 3, curve out, and produce such a strong board that you can win. The reason why I haven't been talking too much about Kiwi is every deck in the format right now is trying to just curve out their lines. Like, every deck is just basically, there's a few, of course, green, blue, and blurple in a sense are ramp decks, but amber steel, purple steel, green steel is popping up again. They all just really want to play 1, 2, 3 as well, and I felt like Kiwi Bird trying to do that just wasn't really up to scratch, especially as we didn't have those amazing things that could you play your curve out and then protect it with Cogsworth. And the Scar builds, I felt just trying to get Scar to work, when everyone knows what Scar does now, it's quite hard to do. You're going to pop that Pluto or that Lawrence or that Pleakley or whatever for about 12 card draw after Alice buffs it up. So everyone's got an answer in their deck for a 5 cost like that, or at least they're trying to. And if your deck doesn't, that's kind of a bit rough for you. But Amber Steel will save its strengths for that, and if not, they'll have won the game before it's important anyway. But with this build, it's and of course with Jasmine as well. I mentioned the Jasmine build. The Jasmine's very, very good. I think if you were to mirror, I've played. Fortunate enough to queue into players like Justin Morales, and in the mirror he was running a sort of, we saw him recently do very well in Amsterdam with a Jasmine build. And when I say Jasmine build, I mean the 1-drop and the 4-drop that you can shift on and then quest, and then you can look at the top 3 and take an ally card. We saw Justin use that to get a very good score in Amsterdam at a 3k, I think it was. Played against him, and when you get the Jasmine shift off, I think they are very much more favored. They have a card that works way more, they're just a way more utility there. It's just a better card. Your hand size isn't shrinking. It's kind of hard for us to deal with a 2/5 on turn 2, especially in this build. But you're going to have quite a good handful of games where you just don't get that Jasmine shift. And later on in the game, top decking them, Jasmines, even the 4-drops feel kind of rough. You don't really want to just hard play a Jasmine. It doesn't do much for you. You really want to just be able to shift it onto quest and draw a card. But after looking at the top 3, we'll pick a card basically. But with this, we do none of that really. We're just trying to be as consistent as we possibly can. The way I've approached it is you have your Captain Hooks. Of course, I can run for each card. Captain Hook and Mulan. Like Mulan is there because you're going to be doing some quite heavy mulligans. It pairs quite well with just mulliganing deep for stuff, and then you might end up with a bunch of docks or a dock and a Beyond the Horizon. You don't need both, so one of them needs to be discarded. Captain Hook is just so we don't lose that early aggression. Amber Steel and Purple Steel are still going to be playing their bodies out and just questing as aggressively as they possibly can, whereas we will want a couple turns to ramp up and then we'll start doing our thing. Tipo, Sail, and Pleakley, like I'm playing all of those cards because the main aim of this deck is to basically ramp twice. You want to ramp on 2, and then you want to ramp on 3, and then you'll be leaning into your 6-drops, and you just keep playing 6s, 7s, keep playing them. If you ever need to draw cards, you've got Beyond the Horizon or Dock, but to be honest with you, the deck is so weighted on top-end stuff, you most likely will be drawing them. If not, you can develop your brain and look for a card that you might want instead. Strength of the Raging Fire is a little bit of removal, but it's been a bit weaker in this build because we just don't get the characters wide, but it's still not bad. But yeah, we really wanted the main. I wrote this down for someone in a Discord. The objectives are how to pilot this deck. I think objective 1 is look for 2 ramp options in your opening hand. Of course, I think the most ideal is a Tipo and a Pleakley. Using Tipo to dump it and then Pleakley to dump that. Sail is also not bad, but of course you'd need a 1-drop as well. But if not, just Tipo and then Sail on 3 as well, because really the deck unlocks itself once it hits those higher numbers. When it hits 6 and 7, you've got to look at all of these cards that we can really play. We can do the Robin Hoods, Tinkerbells, Hades, Vincenzo, and on top of that, I think the Jasmine is sort of strong enough. Basically, the reason why I've been liking the Jasmine is we saw the Elephant as a 3/7 is just such a strong body that a 3/7 5-drop that can also be buffed to a 6/7 is also not bad as well. So I've been really enjoying the Jasmine in there, and we've got a Scrooge McDuck in there. I think this 3x Scrooge can be really played around with. For a while, I had Donald Duck, the 5-cost one that ramped on when you play it, kind of like Detective Mickey did, and at one point it was Namari as well. But I put it as Scrooge because you're not always going to hit those double ramps, and you just want like something to play really, and Scrooge is just a nuts body to put on the board for 4 ink or 5/5 that quests for 2. It's very awkward for anyone to remove that effectively. The bodies we're looking at here are like 4/6s from Iago, aren't we, or 4/6s even from Elsa, the 8-cost, so nothing really removes it that effectively. They're going to have to find some way to work with it. If it's an Elephant, they need to Hypnotic Strength it, buff it up, or you're going to get a 2-for-1 as someone else will run something else into the Scrooge. Probably won't be a 2-for-1 if the Elephant survives, but you should probably have an answer to deal the rest of those 2 damage to take the Elephant off the board. But it's sort of been Scrooge has been fine. Some games where the deck sort of bricked a bit, all I've just ended up doing is just playing out decent bodies like Scrooge, like a double Scrooge, and then just questing out until it's so awkward for them to remove anything. But yeah, their main objective of the day of the game is to ramp on 1 and then ramp on 3, and also in your mulligan try and keep some of this cheaper stuff that we don't really want in the opening hand. So Captain Hook, Mulan, Tipo, Smash and Strength as well, like cards that we just really don't want to be top decking later on in the game, and all of this does will increase your chances of top decking some of the better stuff. And also the opening hand, majority of it's going to be all in ink, and we're just going to force ourselves into top deck mode, which again, if you sort of manage to weight it properly and ink all of that early stuff really early on in the game, if you manage to ink things like Captain Hook and Mulan, you can just basically get yourself into a spot where your top decking is strong. Even Pleakley, I think I'd try and keep some Pleakleys, even if you've got one, like maybe with your opening hand, you've got a Tipo and 2 Pleakleys. I'll keep both Pleakleys because, again, I don't want to be top decking that card later on. So give yourself the best odds to top deck the cards that are the best for you. And I don't think, I've said the word top about 5 times now, but I'm going to keep saying it. I don't think it's that bad to force yourself into that sort of game state. In this version of Lorcana and set 9, a lot of decks have been doing that, really. I mean, Green Blue, if it doesn't get its Clarabelles, that's what it ends up doing. And like all the steel decks basically do that, but they have Dock, so that's what we do as well. And Dock is not a bad top deck, as most people notice. You know, it just keeps the engine going. And you just get to this point where, you know, once you've ramped twice, you've unlocked all the characters that cost 6 and 7, you're just going to play Tinkerbell, and then maybe you play another Tinkerbell, and then maybe you play a Hades, and maybe you play a Vincenzo, and then maybe you play a Jasmine, or maybe you play a Robin. And it's just constant pressure of just every turn you play a big character, and it just pushes the board more in your favor. You know, maybe if they're trying to be quick as well, you can maybe take some things out and then say, well, now I've got like a bunch of 2-questers as well that are huge bodies. So it's awesome. Jasmine and Robin Hood can lock down genies from questing. I'm surprised how much agency I've actually had into genie matchups. But it's been, yeah, all round just performing quite well. I think if I was on this right at the start of the set, I could have much more games into it and then maybe feel very confident about bringing it to an event. But for me, this feels like kind of the peak of Sapphire Steel right now. And I've done a list on the Scar build and looked at some other sort of builds, but I think this is the right way to do it. It's kind of how it's felt. It's felt the most effective, and it's given me the best result. I can cover some of the matchups as well and cover what I think it's good into. I think cover the first two, Purple Steel and Amber Steel. Amber Steel, of course, has major high rolls. The deck is just built with dense 2-questers and the ability to sing strength. You know, ability to use strength the most effectively, because they can just span the board with big questers, strength your character, and then move on with their life and quest out. That matchup can be quite rough. I think if you're on the play, it's not too bad. You're going to get to this Tinkerbell quite early. You're going to get to a point where even if you have to pay for Tiana, it's not too rough. You know, you will just pay with it with Tinkerbell and then put 2 damage somewhere else and probably take it out. And, you know, 2 for 1 and really minus their board a bit and say, if you've got anything, you have to run it into my stuff. Big Hades as well can be used in those things. The best thing for Amber Steel basically to do into this deck is to shift Rhino on 2. It's a fairly awkward body and it will just keep questing for 2 for a long time in the game. But I don't feel that's too bad. I think, though, you have to take into account Amber Steel, the way it's built in this set. If you're on the draw and they manage to get just the insane best hand they can possibly get, there's no deck that just beats that. You know, if they're triple dazing you, if they're Aurora into Tiana, into a second Tiana, that's just going to be rough. Like, to remove that, there's going to be so much lore, so much pressure they're putting onto you. So you just can't be upset with them. But to be honest with you, when they mid-roll to low-roll, getting Tinkerbells out early, Hades and Tiana's never feels that bad. You know, you always feel like you can win the game. You could opt to put the Smash as Fire the Cannons. We are bringing the Unink up to a very high amount, so I think at that point I'd look at removing the Scrooge and try some of those cards I mentioned earlier, like Namari, or you could try Miss Bianca, because in a sense you can kind of do the same thing if you have a Tipo, Pleakley, or something else on the board. So yeah, I think that matchup's not the worst. You know, once you get to the point where Vincenzo can take something out, like take out a Nala or anything really, or, you know, once you pair it with that Tinkerbell as well, if you Tinkerbell into Vincenzo, you know, you've got this point where you're going to take something off their board. So if they ever turn anything sideways, Tinkerbell will be able to remove that, and Vincenzo is going to quest for 3 every turn, and he has 8 health. So it's not too bad. Into Purple Steel has felt like the best matchup for me. They're not that quick. They can't really get out of the gate as fast as Amber Steel. Is the matchup I want to see. Sometimes I can just lock a board down with a Jasmine and I'll just play a Tinkerbell. You know, if you play that Jasmine first and they can't deal with it, and then you play the Tinkerbell and it's, oh Lord, now I've got 2 things I have to deal with and they're equal to, you know, 12 health. I need to do 12 worth of damage to remove these 2 things off the board. And then you just play Hades, Vincenzo. Like I say, you get to this point where you're just layering on top over and over again. Big drops. So it doesn't feel too bad there. Into Blurple. Yeah, so Purple Steel is probably the best matchup, I think, for this deck. Into Blurple, I could say I've had matchups where I've 2-0'd it. I've matchups where I got 0-2'd. Really, to be honest with you, I think you play your game plan. Your deck has to do what it has to do. Like I say, you have to get that double ramp. You have to keep layering big drops one after another and just keep slamming them on the board. Most expensive characters you can. And they really, it depends on how many Hades and Elses they find. I think that really is the make or break. This is not saying this deck is a meta breaker destroy Blurple, everything. I don't think it is. Of course, we just love Sapphire Steel on the channel, and any chance I get to play it and it feels very good in the meta, I do take that chance. But into Blurple, it always has felt how many elses they get to exert and get some very good trades, and how many Hades they get later on. You know, if they get 1 Hades and we see 3, I feel a lot better in that state. If they, you know, get double Elsa, double Hades, and I have not got that many removal cards, it just feels kind of rough, to be honest with you. So that is really the Blurple matchup. I think it really leans on how many removal options they have. They have some of the better options for removing Vincenzo, because they can use Into the Unknown once it's exerted, so it's always risky to quite quest with it. But the matchup doesn't feel like you're going in going, oh, I've just lost this, so there's no point in me playing it. You go in thinking, you know, I can get it, I just need to play all these things properly. It's surprising how much you can put pressure on their evasions. You know, if they're just going to go, right, I think I can evasion spam you with Dumbos and Genies, you know, Robin Hood, Jasmine, just putting those things on the board and saying, if you ever turn them sideways, I can remove them, and locking them out for quite a bit is always just pretty strong, force them to find another answer to the Robin Hood, and that might mean that they won't find an answer to your Jasmine, or they won't find an answer to your Tinkerbell, or just whatever, really. So altogether, that matchup never feels the worst. It feels like you can do some options in there as well. But again, I think you're looking at slightly unfavored into Blurple, fairly good into their low rolls and mid rolls, but pretty bad into their high rolls. But then again, it's why it's the top performing deck in the format. Blurple is the best deck right now. It's winning everything. It's taking the highest meta shares. Like, I can say having some agency and having a game plan into Blurple is better than what some decks can really produce right now. Some decks outside are like the big 4 decks, I think, really. Some like Ruby Steel just doesn't have an option into Blurple. It's just, I'll probably lose this one. But this one does not feel that bad. It feels like you can do some things, and it's very dependent on how many removals they get and how smoothly the best deck in the format runs, basically, or the most popular deck in the format. I'm going to stop saying best deck just for a moment, because it might be, but it might not be. And the next one I'm going to mention is Green Blue. Green Blue, the only thing I'll say is, no, it's not the only thing I'll say. I'll say a few things about it. I don't think it's too bad. The Scrooges added in there were pretty nice. I've managed to be able to 2-0 it. You play with like barely any hand size. There's no fear of Clarabelle. You play with 1 or 2 cards in hand at best most of your game. And even when you do a Beyond the Horizon, you're likely to just dump the cards that you find anyway, maybe ink, and then play one of your 7 drops that you draw. So you're back down to 1 card. So it doesn't feel bad at all. The main thing with that is versus Green Blue, your Vincenzo is kind of shut off and being played. There's nothing really good enough for you to want to hit it. Maybe a 2-3 Clarabelle if this presenting it, maybe I might be able to shift it. But besides that, the main issue is Under the Sea. They can grab him. If it was a 3-8, the card would be stunning, but because it's a 2-8, you know, they can Under the Sea it, and that can feel kind of rough if you ever invest 7 ink into a character and they Under the Sea it. So it almost feels like they're getting their money back on the Under the Sea with just 1 character, which is mad. So that card's kind of shut off. But you know, layering Tinkerbells, Jasmine's pretty good because they play a lot of 5/5s. They play Scrooge McDuck, the uninkable one that we're playing. They play Baymax. They play John Silver. So Jasmine's pretty good for that, just to trade up and say, now you have to hit something back to finish off the Jasmine. Tinkerbell littering the 1 damage across just makes maths better on things. And you play 4 Hades. I see a lot of the Green Blue not running 4 Hades anymore. So you can just basically keep deleting their board and keep going wide. If they ever manage to get a head held high Under the Sea, you're kind of lost. But let's be honest, if they do that against any deck, there's the whole board gone. I think the only things that survive are like Monstro and Ratigans that I'm seeing teched into lists. So Green Blue has felt slightly better. I think matchup wise, your best matchups, Purple Steel right at the top. I'll put Green Blue probably second, Amber Steel, and then maybe Blurple. Maybe Blurple is a bit of a better matchup than Amber Steel is. But to be honest with you, I went into that thinking I'm going to make a list of the best matchups. I think Purple Steel is arguably the best, but the rest all feel like you have agency, you have options, you have lines you can take, you can have a very good high rolls compared to them, and you can win the game very, very much so. So I think altogether this deck is not too bad. I think it's a very strong choice. If you're still really loving the Sapphire Steel, this is the best approach I've seen to it. And also we've seen around, I think the name was Complex, I can't remember. I must have seen their list like a while ago and then completely forgot about it. And then I started going this because I was like, I want to try a Beyond the Horizon list. I saw it on the Lore League. I saw someone playing it. I think they were losing to Blurple, but it still made me want to play it. I built it, then someone linked me. I think Complex is their list. If I got it wrong, you got top 4 in an event and you did very, very well. And they said use this as a template. So that's also out there as well. Definitely look at that list. It's on Inkdex somewhere. If you just go by Sapphire Steel, I'm sure it's very easy to find. And yeah, just taking away the idea of, I'll leave it on this. This is the final note, I guess. Taking away that thing of, okay, so we'll start with Kiwi, just playing that strong curve out. We can't do that as well as Purple Steel or Amber Steel. They can play curves better than us. Jasmine build, we can't, you can do that. There are a lot of players who will still use that build, but I feel being reliant on that is pretty rough. It kind of felt like Green Steel's high roll with Diablo. When they get it, the game feels almost over on that spot. When they don't get it, it just feels very rough. And then you've got like the Scar builds, where it's just relying on that Scar to stick for one turn and then hoping that the card draw we get from that is good enough to win the game. This is removing all of those sort of variables and just saying, I am going to ramp up to 6 or 7, and I am going to play every card that costs 6 or 7 over and over until you submit and quit the game. Of course, keep in mind if a deck's managed to go wider than you, but also wider than you with better characters. If they're playing 1-drops, and you're putting a Tinkerbell down, that's kind of a very good spot for you. But if they're managed to like triple Genie or triple Scrooge McDuck, it can be very rough, because we invest only in one big character a turn, whereas some decks might want to invest in 2 characters a turn. Double spelling can be kind of rough for the deck. If they're 8 ink and they play double Genie or double Scrooge, it can be rough because we're only investing in one character, which is our big 6 and 7s. But altogether, this has felt the best option for me. I'd put this at very much a tier 2, almost tier 1.5 deck, and I'm pretty sure someone could pilot it to a tier 1. I know there's still a lot of diehard Sapphire Steel fans out there, but it was really nice playing this list again. It's been really nice interacting with all of the Sapphire Steel people, and just seeing all the love for the deck is still out there. So if you want to try a Beyond the Horizon build, this is my attempt at it.